The first time I met Leora Lu, she was 6 years old and furious that the koi in her family pond refused to eat from her palm. I was 5, standing beside my mother in a borrowed apron, because my mother had just been hired as the Lu household's head housekeeper and I was the extra piece of luggage no one had requested. Leora had cheeks like winter peaches and a temper like a match. She stared at the orange fish, lifted her tiny chin, and announced that if the koi didn't cooperate, she would rename the pond Lake of Uncivilized Creatures. I laughed so hard I hiccuped. She turned, saw me, and instead of shouting at the new kid in her territory, she offered me the bucket of fish food, as if we were co-conspirators. "Help me," she ordered. "We'll teach them manners." That was the beginning of our friendship, an alliance built on small rebellions and shared snacks, long before the world decided to hand us a plot. By the time we reached high school, Leora had become a legend at Silver Lake Academy. She was tall and slim, with glossy black hair that looked expensive even when she wore it in a messy ponytail, and she laughed like she had the right to do so. Teachers treated her with careful respect because her family donated equipment to the school, and students treated her with cautious admiration because she could ruin someone socially with a single raised eyebrow. I was the opposite of a legend. Mina Park, scholarship kid, daughter of the Lu family's housekeeper, the girl who knew which corridor had the best lighting for hiding from people. Leora never let anyone call me the helps kid. She called me Mina, and she said it the way you say mine, a word that means belonging and safety at once. The night before Evan Wen arrived, I dreamed of salt and commentary. In the dream, Leora stood at the edge of a dark beach, her uniform soaked and her smile gone, and the wind tore at her hair like an accusation. She wasn't the Leora I knew. She was a character labeled in bold text above her head. Villainous. I watched her walk into the water as if she'd been commanded, and above the waves a stream of floating words flickered like a live chat, cruel and excited. "She deserves it," the words said. "Finally punished. The heroine should step on her. Male lead will never forgive." I tried to run to Leora, but my legs were heavy, as if the sand was cement, and my voice refused to exist. Then the dream skipped forward like a video. Leora's eyes were empty. Her family's mansion was dark. Headlines screamed about lawsuits, humiliation, scandal. A male silhouette, cold, elegant, violent with entitlement, stood in the center of it all. His name appeared like a watermark. Evan Wen. The dream ended with a title card so ridiculous I almost woke up laughing. The billionaire heir's ruthless love at Silver Lake Academy. I woke up sweating, and for a few minutes I lay in my narrow bed in the staff wing of the Lu house, listening to the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the distant click of my mother's shoes in the hallway. I told myself it was just a nightmare stitched from too many web novels and too little sleep. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from the school forum. New transfer student arriving today. Rumor, hidden heir. Rumor, dangerous. Rumor, too handsome to be real. Attached was a candid photo of a boy stepping out of a black car, face half turned away as if he disliked being seen. The angle showed enough to confirm what my dream had already printed into my skull. Evan Wen had arrived. At breakfast in the Lu dining room, Leora shoved a premium lunchbox into my hands like she was paying taxes. "Eat," she demanded. "Your face looks like you fought a ghost." I tried to smile. My throat felt tight. Leora tore open my plain dumplings, stole one with no shame, and her eyes brightened. "This is better than whatever my mother thinks is balanced nutrition. Mina, you are a genius." She spoke casually, but my dream vision flashed. Her salt-stiff hair, her dead eyes, her label. I stared at her laughing mouth, and my fear sharpened into a decision. If the world had a script, I would smear ink on it until the words bled. The first time I saw Evan Wen in person, Silver Lake Academy looked like a movie set arranged around him. Students clustered in the hallway, pretending not to stare while staring anyway. Evan's uniform was perfectly pressed, his posture straight, his expression detached, as if he had stepped into our school by mistake and was waiting for someone to apologize. The principal smiled too hard. Teachers offered help like they were trying to pet a tiger. Evan's eyes moved over the crowd, bored, and then briefly paused on Leora. Leora leaned toward me and murmured, "He's annoyingly symmetrical." Her voice carried the faintest warmth, a dangerous spark. In the dream, that spark became wildfire. My stomach dropped, and I did the first reckless thing that came to mind. I stepped forward, waved at Evan Wen like an idiot, and announced loudly, "Hi, I'm Mina Park. I think I'm in love with you." Silence struck like a slap. Evan blinked once, slow and unimpressed. Leora inhaled sharply and then, because she was Leora, she laughed. "Mina," she said in a bright, scolding tone. "Have you lost your dignity in the laundry room?" Student snickered. Evan's mouth twitched as if considering whether I was a joke worth noticing. "I don't know you," he said calmly. "Try studying instead of performing." He turned and walked away. I should have been humiliated, and part of me was, but my relief was loud enough to drown embarrassment. Leora's immediate reaction wasn't curiosity or attraction, it was outrage on my behalf. She grabbed my sleeve and hauled me toward the stairs. "You're banned from confessing in public," she declared. "You're also banned from ruining my morning." I nodded obediently, because she was yelling at me with love. That afternoon, I became the most dedicated fake admirer Silver Lake had ever suffered. I wrote Evan a confession letter every week on pastel stationery. I tied the envelopes with ribbon. I sprayed them with rose scent so strong it could kill a small animal. I varied the font. I varied the metaphors. I promised him eternal devotion and immediate snacks. Evan never replied. He didn't even throw them away in front of me, which was somehow worse. He treated my offerings like dust that couldn't stain him. My second tactic involved breakfast. Evan Wen sat in the back corner of the classroom with a book in English he probably understood too well. Every morning I approached his desk with a paper bag and my best hopeful expression. Every morning I offered him something I knew he disliked, based on nothing but instinct and a deep faith in contrarian male leads. Greasy pork buns, sweet soy milk, sticky rice rolls. On day 5, he finally spoke. "Are you trying to poison me?" he asked without looking up. "No," I answered earnestly. "I'm trying to impress you with persistence." He raised his eyes, cool and sharp, and said, "Persistence without self-respect is just noise." I walked away smiling because the noise was working. Behind me, I could feel Leora's glare burning a hole through Evan's head. The problem with fighting a plot is that it adjusts. A week later, a girl from class 3 confessed to Evan in the corridor, trembling like a leaf. Evan rejected her with a lecture about wasted time and shallow emotion, his tone precise and cutting. The girl's face crumpled. Before I could intervene with my rehearsed back-off lines, Tara Tang stepped forward. Tara was the scholarship student everyone whispered about. Spotless grades, second-hand shoes, calm eyes. She faced Evan with a stubborn chin and said, "You can say no without humiliating people." Evan stared at her as if she'd spoken in a forbidden language. The hallway fell into a hungry hush. In my dream, this was where their fate glued together. I moved fast. I slid between them and clasped my hands dramatically. "Evan," I said loudly, "you're right. Everyone should focus on studying, starting with me. I'll study your face later." Tara's mouth twitched, half amused. Evan's eyes narrowed. Leora's snort echoed off the lockers. The crowd's attention snapped back to me, the resident disaster, and the fragile tension between Evan and Tara broke like a thin thread. It wasn't a victory, but it was a delay. Delays mattered. 3 weeks into my campaign, I was crouched by the vending machines, eating a dumpling I'd smuggled from home, when a boy sat beside me without invitation. He was tall, lean, and his grin looked like it belonged on someone who had never been punished for mischief. He stared at my food like it was a holy relic. "If you touch it," I warned, "I will bite you." He laughed. "I'm Kai Fu," he said, "and your acting is horrible." I almost choked. "Excuse me?" Kai leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your eyes don't look lovesick. They look strategic, like you're trying to drag a character away from a cliff." My fingers went cold. My dream's floating chat had called me a side character, a best friend's shadow, a comic relief. But it had never called me strategic. Kai's stare held no mockery, only tired recognition. "What cliff?" I said cautiously. Kai's grin faded into something steadier. "The one the story wants your friend to fall from." He paused. I had the dream too. I stared at him. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs like a warning drum. "What did you see?" I asked, because asking was safer than believing. Kai exhaled, as if letting out a secret he'd been holding behind his teeth. "I saw my brother destroyed," he said. "Adrian Fu, student council king, future perfect adult, reduced to a man who can't breathe because he's always running after someone else's tragedy. I saw him collapse in the rain. I saw him dragged into a romance he didn't choose." His gaze sharpened. And I saw your Leora turned into a villain so the male lead could feel righteous. When someone names your fear, it stops being a private monster and becomes a shared enemy. My shoulders loosened slightly. So you want to help, I said. Kai nodded once. I want to cheat fate, he replied, and his voice held the stubbornness of someone who had already decided to try even if he failed. We met after school behind the gym, where the teacher's security cameras couldn't see the corner by the storage shed. Kai took out his phone and showed me a screenshot he'd written down from his dream. A list of key plot points, like a disaster itinerary. The names were different in his dream, but the pattern matched mine. Rich male lead, poor heroine. Mean rich girl villainous. Second male lead who suffers nobly. My stomach twisted with angry familiarity. Kai tapped the screen. If we steer Leora toward Adrian, she won't chase Evan, he said. And if Adrian is busy dealing with Leora, he won't spiral over Tara. He glanced up. We can protect both of them. I folded my arms. Your brother doesn't deal with people, I said. He rescues them. Kai's jaw tightened. Exactly, he said bitterly. That's why he's so easy for the plot to use. I considered the pieces like chess. The plot wanted Evan and Tara to collide with maximum drama. It wanted Adrian to suffer in the background. It wanted Leora to burn. I refused. Fine, I said. We'll pair Leora with Adrian. But first, we need to pull Adrian's attention away from Tara. Kai's gaze flickered. How? He asked, sounding like someone who had tried everything. I lifted my chin. You, I said, are going to chase Evan when? Kai stared at me as if I'd suggested he lick the floor. That's insane, he said. I shrugged. The plot loves chaos, I replied. We'll give it chaos it can't romanticize. Kai pressed his palm to his face, then laughed in disbelief. My brother is going to kill me, he said. He already does in the dream, I pointed out. At least in real life you'll survive the lecture. Our plan began with spectacle. Kai leaned into the role with shameless enthusiasm. He started sitting near Evan in the library, asking him questions in a tone that sounded flirtatious if you squinted. He offered Evan bottled water during PE, which Evan refused with icy disdain, but the gesture alone made half the school gasp. He joined Evan's debate club meeting uninvited. Evan's expression remained carved from contempt, but his attention shifted from Tara toward the sudden storm named Kai Fu. Meanwhile, I continued my fake crush with even more dedication, making sure Leora witnessed every moment. I loud sighed in Evan's direction. I accidentally dropped my pen so Evan could ignore me heroically. I declared that I would run a marathon if Evan told me to. Leora's patience frayed like rope. You are embarrassing our entire gender, she snapped one morning as we stood under the stairwell. You are also embarrassing me. I clasped my hands in apology. I'll try to embarrass you less, I promised. You can't, Leora muttered. You were born embarrassing. She said it with fondness, and my heart eased. Then the plot struck back with rain. A rumor spread at lunch. Evan Wen had said he'd consider dating anyone who could run 3 full laps around the courtyard in the downpour after school, because apparently emotional maturity could be measured in drenched uniform fabric. Students gathered at the corridor windows like they were watching a sporting event. I was furious, because this was classic male lead tests heroine nonsense, except now it was male lead tests everyone. I hissed to Kai. We can't let Tara run. Kai's eyes widened. She'll do it, he said, voice strained. She never backs down. We looked at each other, and without further discussion we sprinted toward the courtyard. The rain was heavy, the kind that turned the schoolyard into a shining sheet. Kai stepped out first, jaw clenched, and shouted, Evan Wen, start the timer! He took off like he was fleeing fate itself. I followed, shoes slapping water, hair plastering to my face. We ran and ran and ran, laughing through misery because the absurdity was our shield. From the covered walkway, Leora's furious voice pierced the rain. Mina Park, she screamed. Stop! Have you lost your mind? If you keep degrading yourself, I'm ending our friendship. Her umbrella bobbed as she stormed along the edge, eyes blazing. You can dislike him, you can ignore him, but you cannot audition for humiliation like it's a scholarship. Kai yelled back. I'm doing it for strategic reasons. Leora's scream became something inhuman. Your strategy is stupid. In the crowd, someone shouted that Adrian Fu was struggling to breathe, his asthma triggered by the cold, wet air and the sprint he'd taken down the stairs after spotting Kai. I didn't understand at first, because in my mind Adrian was the golden boy immune to weakness. But then I saw him, tall, composed even while fighting for air, eyes dark with panic. He shoved through students and reached for his brother with a hand that shook. "Kai!" he barked hoarsely. "Stop!" Kai's head whipped around mid-run, and his face went pale. "Hyung," he said, stumbling. And then Adrian grabbed him, almost carrying him out of the rain despite being the one who was wheezing. The scene was so ridiculous I wanted to cry and laugh at once. Evan Wen stood under the overhang, watching with narrowed eyes, as if he just realized his little test had consequences beyond his ego. We ended the running spectacle in the nurse's office. Adrian sat hunched on the bed, inhaler trembling in his hand, face sweaty with strain. Kai hovered near him, guilt in every line of his posture. Leora stood at the door, dripping rainwater onto the tile, arms crossed like a judge. She looked at me with a mix of fury and relief that made my stomach twist. "Are you done?" she asked coldly. "Or do you want to run another 3 laps for your dignity?" "I'm done," I croaked, my dignity drowned. Leora's mouth twitched despite herself. "Good," she said, then glared at Evan, who had followed the commotion inside. "And you," she added. "If you ever dare treat humans like amusement again, I will personally mail you a dictionary with the definition of common decency highlighted." Evan's eyes flickered, not afraid, but unsettled. After that day, my strategy succeeded in the narrowest sense. Leora's attention stayed fixed on my ridiculous crusade and on scolding Evan, not on the tiny spark of attraction the plot wanted to feed. Kai's pursuit of Evan became an ongoing joke that kept the school gossip machine spinning in circles. Adrian's protective instincts remained directed at his brother rather than at Tara. We had created a mess so distracting that the script's original romance struggled to take root. I wanted to believe we'd won. Then I saw Leora stare at Tara Tang. It happened in the library. Late afternoon, sunlight slanting through tall windows. Tara was laughing softly as she explained a math concept to a classmate, her fingers tracing lines on a worksheet. Her laughter wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was just genuine. Leora walked past, paused, and her gaze lingered. A crease appeared between her brows, as if an invisible hand had tightened a thread in her mind. I recognized that expression from my dream, the moment the villainous algorithm began calculating jealousy. That night, I met Kai under the bleachers and said, "The plot is changing targets." Kai stared at the ground. "It's trying to make Leora hate Tara," he guessed, voice rough. "And it's trying to make Adrian rescue Tara," I added, remembering his face in the dream when he carried her out of danger and smiled like sacrifice was love. Kai's fists clenched. "We don't let it," he said. The next day, the universe tried to force a humiliation scene anyway. Someone smeared chalk on Tara's locker with the words, "Poor girl fishing for rich boys." Tara stared at it for a long moment, then calmly erased it with a wet tissue and walked away with her spine straight. Students whispered. Leora watched from the staircase, expression darkening. She didn't smile, but her irritation rose like smoke. I stepped beside her and said lightly, "Tara's handwriting is too neat for that." Leora shot me a look. "I didn't say she wrote it," she snapped. "I didn't say you said she wrote it," I replied, matching her pace. I said, "Her handwriting is neat." Leora's lips pressed together. "You're annoying," she muttered. "And you're thinking too hard," I said softly. "Don't let a story push you." She froze for half a second. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp with suspicion. Then she scoffed and walked faster. The plot didn't need her to say yes. It only needed her to feel something ugly. A week later, Tara disappeared after last period. Teachers assumed she'd left early. Students assumed she was avoiding cleaning duty. My stomach turned to ice. This was the pivot from the dream. The heroine trapped overnight in an unused office, feverish and helpless, rescued by the male lead in a dramatic scene that would glue their fates together. I ran to Kai and grabbed his sleeve. "Locked room incident," I whispered. Kai didn't waste breath on questions. We split up, searching stairwells, empty classrooms, the music room, the storage corridors behind the auditorium. The school after hours smelled like dust and floor cleaner, shadows pooling under desks like spilled ink. In the far wing near the rooftop access, I found a door ajar that shouldn't have been. A faint sound came from inside 3 knocks, desperate and small. "Tara," I hissed. A voice answered, thin and hoarse. Mina, Tara whispered. Recognition and fear tangled together. I'm here. I shoved the door open and stepped into a cramped office packed with outdated textbooks and broken chairs. Tara sat on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes bright with fever. Relief hit me so hard it made my vision blur. It's okay, I said, kneeling beside her. We're getting you out. The door slammed behind me. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot. I spun, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It didn't budge. Outside, the corridor was silent. Someone had locked us in. My pulse hammered. The plot was laughing again. Tara's face went white. They wanted me alone, she said quietly. They said the teacher needed me in here to file forms. I swallowed rage. We're not giving them the scene they want, I said, forcing my voice steady. Kai is coming. As if summoned by my words, footsteps thundered outside. Kai appeared at the small window in the door, eyes wild. Are you inside? He demanded. Yes, I shouted. Don't touch the... Too late. In his panic, Kai yanked the handle, shoved the door, then pulled it closed to check the latch, and in doing so, he stepped inside and sealed himself into our prison. He stared at the handle, horrified, then at me. He began. But his apology dissolved when his breathing hitched. He inhaled too fast, too shallow. His shoulders rose, his lips paled. Kai, I snapped. Where's your inhaler? In my bag, he rasped. Outside. Tara's hands trembled. He's having an attack, I said, and my voice went colder because panic could kill him faster than any plot. I searched the room, yanking open drawers, checking cabinets, throwing aside piles of paper. My fingers found nothing useful except a trash bin with a fresh plastic liner. The ugly solution flashed in my mind. Breathing into a bag to slow hyperventilation, Kai saw my hand reach toward it and glared even while gasping. No, he wheezed, pride stubborn as ever. You are dying with manners, I hissed. Fine. Then we do it differently. I tore pages from an old notebook, folded them into a makeshift fan, and directed Tara to wave cool air toward his face, while I coached his breathing the way my mother had taught me to calm panic. In. I ordered. Hold. Out. Again. Kai's eyes watered. He obeyed, because despite his ego, he wanted to live. We needed air, and we needed out. The only opening was a narrow window near the ceiling, barred but cracked, with enough space for a slim person to squeeze through if they were determined and reckless. Tara looked at it, then at her hands, then at me. I can, she said. You have a fever, I argued. I can, Tara repeated, and in her tone was the stubbornness that had gotten her this far. If we wait, he gets worse. I helped Tara stand. Her knees shook, but her gaze stayed focused. She climbed onto a chair, then onto a stack of old books, gripping the window frame with trembling fingers. I held her waist to steady her. She squeezed through, scraping her elbow on the bars, then dropped into the corridor with a muffled grunt. Moments later, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Fresh air flooded the room like mercy. Tara swayed, face gray. I caught her, and then we moved. I hooked Kai's arm over my shoulder while Tara supported his other side despite her trembling legs. We stumbled down the staircase, our shoes squeaking on the steps, our breaths ragged in unison. Halfway down, Leora appeared, hair loose, expression murderous with worry. Mina, she shouted, grabbing my shoulders. I checked the cameras because you vanished and I was about to call an ambulance and a lawyer. Her gaze snapped to Tara, then to Kai's pale face. Something in her expression shifted from fury to action. Give him to me, she ordered. I can carry him, I protested. Leora rolled her eyes as if I'd offered to carry a refrigerator. She slid under Kai's arm, took his weight with surprising strength, and hauled him down the remaining steps like he was a suitcase she'd bought on sale. Adrian, she yelled. Someone get Adrian. At the base of the stairs, Evan Wen appeared, drawn by the commotion. His eyes landed on Tara, then on Leora, and suspicion sharpened his face. What did you do to her? He demanded. Leora didn't even slow. She thrust a hand out and shoved him aside with casual force. Move, she snapped. If you block my path again, I'll throw you into the janitor's closet and lock it. Evan stumbled, shocked more by her refusal to play the villain than by the shove itself. Kai managed a wheezy laugh. We barreled into the nurse's office, where Adrian arrived seconds later, face tight with fear. He took one look at his brother and his composure cracked. "Kai," he said, voice low, and his hands shook as he checked Kai's pulse like he'd done it 1,000 times in nightmares. The nurse fussed. The inhaler was found. Breathing steadied. Slowly, stubbornly. When the immediate crisis passed, Tara insisted on telling the truth in a calm, precise voice, describing how she'd been tricked into the office and locked in. She didn't dramatize. She didn't cry. She treated it like a fact that deserved a response. Listening to her, I felt a new kind of anger. Not at Tara for being the heroine, but at the world for thinking her suffering was romantic fuel. Leora sat on the bench outside the nurse's office with her arms crossed. Her fingers tapped her knee in a restless rhythm. Adrian stood nearby, face still pale, and for once he wasn't looking at Tara like a destined obsession. He was looking at Leora like she was the only person who had the audacity to keep his brother alive. "Thank you," Adrian said quietly. Leora flicked her gaze up, surprised. "Don't," she replied, voice brusque. "If you thank me, I'll feel feelings." Adrian's mouth twitched. "Then I'll write you a formal letter," he said. Leora huffed. "I'll set it on fire," she threatened. I watched them bicker, and in my chest a knot loosened. The plot had wanted Adrian to carry Tara out of darkness. Instead, Leora had done it, and Adrian's attention had tilted toward her in a way the script hadn't predicted. It wasn't love yet, but it was interest, and interest was a door. After the rooftop incident, our strange alliance became something real. Tara didn't become our friend overnight, because Tara didn't trust easily, and frankly she shouldn't. Still, she accepted help in careful doses. When we learned her grandmother's hospital bills were crushing her family, Leora used her mother's connections to arrange a specialist appointment without making it sound like charity. "It's not a favor," Leora said, chin lifted. "It's a strategic investment in a future lawyer who will owe me one day." Tara stared, then laughed softly, and the sound felt like a small victory. Kai quietly offered money where Leora couldn't, insisting on a formal loan agreement so Tara wouldn't feel humiliated. Adrian, who overheard, tried to contribute too, but Tara refused with firm politeness. "I will repay what I accept," she said, and her eyes held the kind of pride that deserved respect. In exchange, Tara became our tutor. She was terrifying in the gentlest way. She corrected Kai's calculus mistakes with sharp precision, then asked if he wanted water as if she hadn't just sliced his ego into neat sections. She made me rewrite essays until my argument stood upright without crutches. Leora hovered during tutoring sessions with the posture of a bored queen, pretending she was only there to supervise, but her eyes softened each time Tara explained something patiently. Evan Wen kept circling like a planet, refusing to admit gravity. He approached Tara with offers. Private study sessions, expensive gifts, a ride home in his car. Tara rejected him with calm steadiness every time. Evan's confusion grew, as if he'd never met someone who didn't treat his attention like currency. One afternoon he snapped, "Why do you keep refusing me?" And Tara replied, "Because I am not a prize." The hallway went silent. Evan's face tightened, and in his eyes I saw something almost like respect, which annoyed me because male leads didn't deserve growth just for being challenged. Meanwhile, Leora's old jealousy threads frayed and snapped. She stopped watching Tara with irritation and started watching her with curiosity. "She's stubborn," Leora admitted one evening as we walked home. "I can't decide if I want to adopt her or argue with her." "Both," I suggested. Leora glanced at me. "You're weirdly supportive of her," she said. I swallowed. "She's not the enemy," I replied. "She's the target." Leora stared at me, and for a second I thought my mouth had betrayed me again. But no invisible gag tightened. The words existed in the open air. That made my skin prickle with wonder and fear. For weeks after my nightmare, I'd tried to tell Leora the truth, but every attempt had ended in silence. I would open my mouth, and my tongue would go numb, as if the world itself refused to let the villainess know she was being used. After the rooftop incident changed the script, the gag loosened. It was as if the story's authority relied on outcomes, and we had stolen one. One afternoon, Leora leaned over the second-floor railing, listening suspiciously as Kai and I whispered about roles. She called down, "What are you two idiots plotting now?" Kai froze and immediately fled like a guilty cat. I stayed, heart pounding. Leora descended the stairs with dangerous calm. "Mina," she said, folding her arms. "Either you're hiding something or you've joined a cult." I took a breath. If I tell you something impossible, I asked, will you hit me? Probably, Leora answered. But I'll listen first. So I told her. I told her about my dream of the beach, about the floating words that blamed her, about the way Evan Wen was supposed to break people and be rewarded for it. I told her I'd tried to change things by acting like a fool, because a fool is harder for a plot to predict. I told her I'd tried to warn her and couldn't speak, and only now could I finally say the words. Leora didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss me. She sat on the stairwell step and stared at her hands as if reading invisible ink. When I finished, she said slowly, so in that story I'm meant to suffer, and you've been humiliating yourself to redirect me. Yes, I whispered. I'm sorry. Leora lifted her head. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with anger on my behalf. You're not sorry, she said. You're furious. Then her mouth twisted. Also, your strategy is still stupid. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. I'll take that, I said. Leora leaned forward and punched my shoulder lightly, the way she did when she wanted to pretend she wasn't soft. Next time you have a nightmare about me dying, she muttered, tell me first. I'll fight the ocean. The school year moved toward its end with a different kind of momentum. Tara won scholarships and speaking contests, not as a plot device, but through relentless work. She applied for a summer program in law, and we helped her practice interviews, laughing so hard during mock sessions that the librarian threatened to ban us. Adrian began focusing on his own future, rather than being dragged by the gravity of rescue. He still watched Tara sometimes, but it was with admiration for her discipline, not obsession with her suffering. His attention shifted toward Leora in small ways, the way he waited for her before meetings, the way his gaze softened when she argued with a teacher, the way he handed her a spare umbrella without saying it was his. Kai's pursuit of Evan dwindled into a private joke. Evan responded by avoiding Kai with visible irritation, which only made Kai grin wider. My fake crush faded too, because Leora no longer needed that distraction. The first time I stopped writing Evan a letter, no thunder struck and no plot police appeared, which felt like proof that our world was becoming less scripted. Before the news of Evan's departure surfaced, the school tried one last time to package suffering as romance during the Autumn Lantern Festival. Silver Lake Academy loved this event because it looked good in brochures. Paper lanterns hung from trees, food stalls lined the courtyard, student clubs performed on a small stage, and parents donated money while pretending they understood youth culture. In the dream, this festival contained a famous scene. Evan Wen would accidentally meet Tara Tang under falling lantern light, wrap his coat around her shoulders, and say something possessive that would make the internet scream. The heroine would blush. The villainess would watch, heart shredding, and decide to strike. We arrived early with sabotage in our pockets. Leora, acting like she owned the festival, grabbed a staff badge from the organizer and began issuing orders. Move that stall, she instructed a stunned teacher. The smoke is drifting into the stage lights, she pointed at the lantern strings. Double knot those. If one falls on my head, I'll sue the wind. Adrian Fu appeared with the student council team, clipboard in hand. And for the first time I saw him look at Leora with amused admiration, rather than polite distance. Lou, he said, voice careful. You don't have to do everything. Leora didn't look up. If I don't, she replied, people will be incompetent in my vicinity. Adrian's mouth twitched. Noted, he said. And instead of arguing, he adjusted his plan to match hers, the way a smart person adjusts to a storm rather than yelling at it. Watching them coordinate made something in me unclench. The plot could not easily romanticize two people cooperating like equals. Kai, meanwhile, took his role as chaos generator seriously. He volunteered at the confession booth, an atrocious contraption where students wrote wishes and hung them on a wall, and loudly announced that he was accepting both male and female submissions because love was a spectrum and the WAS school needed better PR. Teachers panicked. Students screamed in delight. Evan Wen arrived late, drawn by the noise, and his gaze swept the festival with mild disdain until it snagged on Tara. Tara was working at the charity legal aid stall, explaining to younger students what rights meant in simple language, her voice firm and warm. Evan approached like he owned the air. You're wasting your time, he said, and Tara didn't even flinch. Then I'm wasting it happily, she answered. Her calm refusal to be impressed seemed to irritate him more than insults. I moved closer, ready to interrupt, but Leora beat me to it. She slid between them, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Evan Wen, she said sweetly. Since you're free, you can help with trash collection. This festival doesn't clean itself. Evan's eyes narrowed. And why would I take orders from you? He asked. Leora smiled without warmth. Because, she replied, I'm the kind of person who makes people regret saying no. Adrian cleared his throat as if trying not to laugh, then handed Evan a pair of gloves with formal politeness. Evan looked at the gloves as if they were an insult carved in rubber, but under the combined weight of Leora's glare and Adrian's calm authority, he took them. For 20 minutes, the male lead of the universe picked up trash, while the heroine discussed constitutional law with 8th graders. If the plot had a face, I imagined it grimacing. Later that night, when lanterns floated above the courtyard like small moons, Tara stood beside me and said quietly, You all don't have to keep protecting me. I glanced at her. We're not protecting you because you're weak, I replied. We're doing it because you're tired, and you shouldn't have to fight every battle alone. Tara's eyes softened, and for a second her composure cracked into something raw. I'm used to being alone, she admitted, then forced a small smile. It's strange to have backup, Leora overheard and scoffed. Don't get sentimental, she warned. I'm only here because Mina is a liability and Kai is a menace. Kai popped into our circle with cotton candy in hand. I heard my name, he sang. Tara looked at him with the first genuine amusement I'd seen on her face in weeks. You are a menace, she agreed, and Kai looked delighted, as if he'd earned a medal. When the festival ended, we walked back through the quiet corridor together, lantern light fading behind us. Evan lingered near the exit, watching Tara with a frustration that looked like confusion in disguise. He spoke, low and sharp, as if trying to reassert narrative control. You think you're different, he said. Tara didn't stop walking. No, she replied. I think I'm free. Evan stood still as if that answer had hit him somewhere deep. I didn't pity him, but I did recognize the moment. A character confronting the idea that the world might not revolve around him. Then a new rumor detonated. Evan Wen was leaving. His mother, long exiled from the wealthy Wen household, had returned to power after the legal wife's sudden death in a car accident. And the family wanted Evan abroad to polish his reputation. Students whispered about inheritance. Teachers whispered about transfer paperwork. Evan himself looked as if he'd been bored into exhaustion. On the day of the citywide speech event, Tara stood on stage and spoke about justice and choice, her voice steady and clear. Evan watched from the back of the hall. When she finished, he approached her outside, where the banners fluttered in a warm breeze. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw his posture, tense, controlled, like someone fighting the urge to command. Tara listened with polite patience, then shook her head. Evan's face tightened. Tara's expression didn't soften. She walked away without looking back. Later, I found out what she'd said because Kai relayed it with delighted horror. He told her to come with him, Kai said. He said he could take her abroad and give her a better life. Kai rolled his eyes. Tara told him she already had a life, and she wasn't donating it to his emotional development. Leora laughed so hard she nearly choked on her juice. That girl, she said proudly. Like Tara had become a distant cousin she was allowed to brag about. The day Evan left, the sky was clean and bright, almost insulting. He rolled a suitcase down the corridor, students parting like he was a celebrity. His gaze passed over me without interest, then paused on Leora for half a second. In my nightmare, he had punished her for daring to want him. In this reality, he looked uncertain, then turned away without a word. It wasn't redemption, but it was distance, and distance can be mercy. Graduation arrived with cap tosses and group photos, and our quartet stood slightly apart from the loud crowds, watching the campus that had tried so hard to trap us in clichés. Tara held her diploma like it was a weapon and a promise. Leora held hers like it was a trophy she'd earned out of spite. Kai held his with a grin that said he'd cheated death and enjoyed it. Adrian stood behind us all, calm and steady, as if guarding the future with silent hands. That summer, Tara left for her program. Leora started an entrepreneurship club and bullied adults into letting teenagers pitch real projects. Kai began pulmonary rehab with a seriousness that made me admire him and worry for him at once. Adrian went to university with plans that belonged to him, not to any plot. As for me, I realized that changing fate wasn't just about stopping tragedies. It was about choosing joys that didn't need permission. Kai and I began walking home together after tutoring sessions, then after club meetings, then after everything. He would crack jokes about side character romance, and I would insult his cooking skills. And one evening on the seawall he asked, in a voice trying to sound casual, "If the story tries to separate us, will you fight it again?" I looked at the ocean, calm and golden under sunset, and thought about the night my dream had tried to drown Leora. "I won't fight a story for you," I said, and Kai's face fell. Then I added, "Because I'm not living inside it anymore." I reached for his hand. "I'll just live." Kai's breath hitched, not with asthma this time, but with emotion, and he squeezed my fingers like he was anchoring himself. Years later, the ocean was still the ocean, but it no longer felt like a threat. I returned to our coastal city on a work trip and met Leora in a cafe she'd partly invested in, because she apparently couldn't enter a building without upgrading its fate. She looked stunning in a tailored coat, hair cut into a sharp bob, confidence radiating like heat. Half the women in the cafe asked for her contact before she'd finished ordering. She slid into the seat across from me and said, "So, with predatory calm, are you and Kai getting married, or are you still afraid of fictional consequences?" I almost spat my drink. "You're still obsessed with control," I accused. Leora smiled sweetly. "Control is healthy," she replied. "Besides, I need to plan the wedding aesthetics. If you let Mina plan, you'll end up with balloon animals." "I like balloon animals," I protested. Leora ignored me and lifted her chin toward the window. Outside, Tara Tang stepped out of a taxi in a sharp suit, hair pinned back, eyes fierce. She had become exactly what she'd promised. A woman building her life with her own hands. She spotted us, waved, and walked in with the brisk confidence of someone who didn't need a male lead to carry her anywhere. Adrian followed behind her, not hovering, not rescuing, simply present, and the way Tara's shoulder brushed his sleeve suggested their bond had grown quietly, without dramatics. Leora watched them and sighed. "Look at us," she said. "We ruined the author's favorite suffering." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with romance tropes, and everything to do with chosen family. "We saved ourselves," I corrected. When I left the cafe, dusk painted the sea in copper. I stood on the sidewalk listening to gulls and thought about that first nightmare of Leora walking into dark water. In this reality, she was alive and loud and planning her next conquest of the world. Tara was arguing cases with a spine made of steel. Adrian was breathing easily, no longer a saint trapped in someone else's tragedy. Kai was texting me a photo of his terrible noodles with the caption, "Please do not break up with me over my cooking." The plot, if it still existed, had lost the ability to dictate the ending, because we had learned the simplest rebellion. We refused to perform our suffering on schedule.